but then when is when was the last time you remember getting rain in Southern California, Janine?
Oh gosh. It's hard to remember, Jeff. It never rains in
Yes.
California. I can't sing. So sorry if I hurt your ears, but
No,
it's
you're good.
pretty rare. I did have some girlfriends from college visiting me last weekend, and I was so excited to, have them enjoy the sun. One of them's from back east, like you,
Yeah.
and we were socked in with fog all 4 days. Was such a bummer. And of
Oh
course, the
man.
minute they left, like today, it's glorious sunshine again. So,
No. That's just to give you a little background on Virginia is you have to look at the weather every day. There's no very the weather's very inconsistent. This especially this time of year. It was
mhm.
38 degrees overnight and then in the 60s today, and then it will be.
Wow, that's a swing.
Yep, we're going to be high in the 80s for the weekend, and then we're going to clip off like 5 days of 70 degree during the day and 50s, 40s, 50s at night. And then that should be consistent. But then there'll
Mhm.
be a day when you're in a sweatshirt and a jacket. So it's just the weather is very. You roll with the seasons here. More
Yeah.
cold weather kind of fades out for the most part, and then but it's
Mhm.
not unheard of for Thanksgiving, Christmas when it's cold in a lot of places for us to be in shorts and t-shirts too. So it
Oh,
just
wow.
well, it's
Interesting.
very yeah.
Okay.
It's the seasons come and go there.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
let me tell everyone today's guest is a parenting coach, and I wanted to tell you. This is absolutely prime opportunity as my daughter's getting ready to turn 13 in a couple weeks, and my son is 15. So you're reaching out. Hey, let's connect on the podcast. It was a no brainer for me, Janine, to have you on this podcast as a dad, and not to take away from all the cool nuggets that you're going to give the audience and how we're going to be able to connect with you and all those things. But I feel like I get to learn from a subject matter expert to make us. One thing I'll throw in there as well is I didn't know my dad. So sometimes parenting as a dad is I'm always looking for folks like yourself. I'm reading, I'm consuming, and making
Mhm.
sure that I came up a little differently than traditional parents do in a lot of cases. So I'm always looking for advice and making sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. But she's a Stanford grad, mother of three, who helps parents transform conflict into connection with their teenagers after nearly losing her relationship. With her own son, Janine discovered a new way to communicate and now teaches other families to do the same. Big deal. And I want to tell you that before you take over and talk for the next many hours as you want to, is I see that in my coaching and the stuff I do in athletics is there is a huge disconnect in how that parent sometimes talks down or speaks and communicates with their kid. And I'm excited for everything you can do to help us try to make that better. Janine, I'm
Mhm.
teeing you up. Folks, just so you know, I practiced her last name. Y'all know my accent. I have absolutely destroyed it every time. So I'm going to tee it up to you to take it off here. Tell everybody your full name and let's get going.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for having me, Jeff. And honestly, I got chills from that intro. So thank you. Right. I think we all want to be parents, like good parents, and do the best we can. And it's so frustrating when we feel like maybe that's not happening. But yes, I'm Jeanine Mouchawar. I'm a parenting coach. I coach moms and dads, just like you, Jeff, with preteens, teens, and young adults.
That is awesome. So how we kicked into that story there, just a little bit about you and your son. But what was that moment where you realized the way you were parenting, what your son wasn't working for you?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there was a moment. There was a lot that built up to it. Just to share, when he was little, things went pretty smooth, actually, with all three of my kids. I mean, there were the normal parenting hurdles, but I felt like how I was showing up, what I was saying, what I was doing was working pretty well. When we got to the high school years, I really just noticed things started changing with all three of my kids, but particularly one of my children. And his grades started plummeting, missing assignments started kicking in, a lot of blaming, some disrespect. And it felt like whatever I was doing, which was the traditional approaches, right? These are the rules, these are the consequences. You need to study. You should put your phone away. Right? Don't talk to me that way. I'm going to punish you, right? Any of those sort of traditional ways that most of us, I think, grew up with
Yeah.
wasn't working with him. And the more I was scared and worried, the more I really like clamped down and tightened the reins. I mean, to the point of, I think it was junior year leading into senior year. He didn't have access to driving a car. He didn't have access to any money. Oh gosh, I can't. Oh, I was tracking him on his phone when I thought he was ditching school. And everything I was doing was not helping the situation. In fact, I just noticed he was pulling further and further away. We were talking less and less. There was more explosions. And it was just heart wrenching.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, if I don't do something different than what I'm doing and what I've been doing for the last few years, I'm just not going to have a relationship with him, and I'm not going to know how to help him. And so it was really this moment right in the beginning of his senior year that I was like, you know what? We need to go get some help. And we went to a program together where I learned a new language and a new way to talk to him. And together we learned how to regulate our emotions. I mean, it's kind of like psychology speak. It was all based in cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, but we learned like mindfulness and interpersonal communication and emotion regulation skills, which basically translates into how do we tolerate our feelings when we're angry or when we're frustrated without it causing a huge problem? How do we communicate to each other in a calm way that's not filled with sarcasm or judgment or tone? And those are sort of the skills that we learned. I learned them right alongside with them, and it just completely changed how we interacted with each other. And I was really able to help him turn the grades around, get some better friends, stop doing risky behavior. I was able to have calm conversations that were actually effective. And I just thought, man, this is more important than any class I took at Stanford.
Yeah.
And I want to teach this to as many people as possible.
I like that. It's one of those moments where it's so powerful to you that you become evangelical about it. It gave you something back that was seemed like it was quickly slipping away.
Yeah, talk about bringing some meaning and purpose into my life. I mean, that just became like very meaningful and has really just driven me for the last 10 years to show up and help parents, just like I needed help.
When and I wrote some notes here, um, and you put whatever's happening in your home with your teen is fixable. Um, and as a parent of this teenager, I kind of, and both almost teenager, I have a understanding kind of what's going on in my home, and our straight A's is my daughter. Super proud of her and her efforts, athletics, all those things, and then our son as well. He's in what we call a governor's school here, which is I think I would have called it gifted and talented back in the day of was probably more of the terminology here, but very high achieving. And so we're fortunate that they're in advanced classes, but it also comes with the pressure of being in those advanced classes and and balancing that with fun and life and games and phones and all the things that I didn't have to, I've told them that, Jeanine. We had an issue one day where just some little phone stuff, and I say, listen, you all are having to deal with a device that I didn't have to deal with. And when I took a picture when I was 13 years old, I had to send it off in an envelope to be developed, and I got it back 2 weeks later. You all do it, and your consequences are felt immediately. When my pictures come back, I realized my thumb was over the lens, and I had to retake it, and it was just, I finally threw my hands up, and but they're everything moves so fast for them, and they don't have a handbook. And I don't have a handbook, and we're all trying to figure each other out. So, what do most parents get wrong in these moments of conflict?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. That's hard to sum up in one word or one
Yeah, yeah.
sentence, but if I
Take
had
your
to,
time.
I would say that when there are these moments of conflict, it's typically because your child's doing something that worries you or frustrates you or irritates you, right? Maybe they can't get out of bed and get to school on time in the morning. Maybe there's a missing assignment. Maybe they're being disrespectful. Maybe they just stop sharing with you what's going on, right? And it creates inside of us as parents, right? We get worried, we get scared, we get irritated, we get frustrated. And when that happens, what most of us do is we tend to communicate to them to try to get them to stop or fix or change what they're doing, right? Because we think that's what's best for them. And we subconsciously, I think we think that'll make us feel better because they're making better choices. And this is like right where we get stuck because when we approach that way, typically most of us are using language with you should do, XYZ, you need to do, or we're giving our advice. We're lecturing. And when we do that, most of us hear back from our kids things like, you don't get it, you don't understand, or the one I loved, I've got it, and you're thinking, you got nothing.
Yeah.
And so our kids are, when we approach this way, they tend to shut the conversation down, right? Either with the arguing, which is the most common, but there's also kids. I had a kid who did rolled their eyes, another one who went to their room and slammed the door, right? So there's all different responses, but in general, what we're seeing is they're shutting the conversation down
Yeah.
and they're feeling like we don't understand them and we don't get them. And so when that dynamic's going on, it's virtually impossible to get them to change or stop what they're doing. So I like to tell my clients, like, we got to slow down and establish some real connection, some understanding, some really deep listening to what's going on inside of them before we try to have a conversation about helping them make better choices.
How, all right, so you pitched it back to me for a big question, a big topic is like, that's a lot though. And it kind of leans into what I was talking about I know how hard it was for Jeff here, and I can speak firsthand experience to what it was like for me and growing up in my surroundings and all the things that I dealt with and awkwardness and the pressures that I have and the differences of things. And so I have a very one-sided experience with it, and theirs is not like mine at all. And I try to remind them of that, or I've let them know as they've gotten older, like, hey, I figured out as they got a little older, I'm like, hey, when you were starting at this grade, this is what I was experiencing. Just and it helps us just communicate, and I share some of my life
Wonderful.
story with them as well, right? But what is that? How does that? Is there a key to cracking that, or is that something that you help folks with, or just a little bit of advice of like that you could bridge, or something they could say or do, or what it takes to kind of get that conversation rolling in the right direction to where we all start colliding together versus going separate ways?
Yeah, yeah, great question. It starts with when I talked about earlier how we see our kids doing things and it creates some sort of feeling inside of us, right? Of worry or fear. And when we start conversations, when we're jacked up like that, right there, it's really difficult to have a productive conversation. And so if you can just start with you know, just maybe just taking a beat, like resisting that urge to comment right away, because that tends to be a fiery emotional reaction that you're responding with, but just like taking a minute, if for you, if it works, take a pause, take a deep breath, just like build in a little bit of time there to settle your own worries and fears. Because when you start talking and that's what's going on underneath, your kid's going to sniff that out. And that typically what happens is they push away because it feels overwhelming to them to see the impact that they're having on their mom or their dad.
Yeah.
And so if you can start there and just give yourself that extra second, and then really think about, how can I have a conversation here and not a lecture? Right? How can I try to be a little more objective? Like, instead of saying, what the heck? You're missing 5 assignments. Are you kidding me? Give me your phone. That's it. Right? Maybe it's something like, hey, I checked the student portal and I noticed you were missing some assignments. What's going on?
You sound like
Right?
my
So you're
wife right
in
there.
what?
You sounded like my wife right there. The way you said, I checked the student portal and you have some missing assignments. Can you tell me what's going on? And I'm sitting over there going, "Oh, this is not going to be good. You better own it." But that's kind of how she approaches it. So when you said that, I was getting ready to be like, "Well, what is it?" Because I thought you were talking to me.
Yeah.
Um,
So does that work? Does your child respond to that, or do they get defensive?
a little bit of you get both, right? It just depends
Mhm.
on, I think, the moment. And I think, the biggest thing I realize is they're people too, and they have their own feelings, their own emotions, their own things. They have their own, as much as I preach, imposter syndrome that's shutting, they do. Those are
Mhm.
things that they deal with. So the thing is where we probably see that on our side, Janine, is they know, or like he might say, he's like, yeah, I know, and but the thing we realize is he, one of the last things we had on his we had like a little dip in algebra, and I was like, well, why didn't you come to us for help? That's where we disconnect. Is they'll suffer in silence, and they won't. And finally, I was like, "What's up?" He goes, "Well, I thought it was my job to get it right all the time." I'm like, "No, that's our my job. We'll never get it right all the time. It's our job to work together to try to find a solution." And that was probably the frustrating part. Was there's never any what I would call yelling and any crazy moments here. It's always pretty chill environment. Consequences here are nowhere near as what I see or hear or what have you when it comes to these moments. But it's just um, and in my head I'm like, I've never created this moment to where I shouldn't be approachable, and that's where I'm kind of
Mhm.
stuck sometimes.
Mhm.
Is we're
Because
very
it's
open, right? So I'm like, why would you not come to me? And so that's
Mhm.
what, like, does it, even if it's, well, I thought you would yell at me. I'm like, I've never raised my, I talk loud because it's the way I am. I'm a coach,
Mhm.
and then when I'm getting into my thing, but it's,
Yeah.
I never try to create that atmosphere to where you can't come to us, but it seems like it always exists.
Mhm. I think it's real common for kids to have that underlying fear that you're going to be disappointed in them.
Yeah. Mm, you're right.
But what I hear you saying, Jeff, is you're really working hard to create an environment at home where your kids really feel safe to come and talk to you, and that you're not going to judge them, and that you're really there to try to solve things together, right? That you're not going to be disappointed or shame him for not understanding algebra concepts, but instead you're really there to try to say, like you mentioned earlier, like everything's fixable, right? Like, hey, we're a team. Let's work on this together. I'm not disappointed in you, right? I see that you're just struggling. That doesn't mean I don't love you or think that you aren't smart and capable. You're just struggling with this algebra concept at the moment. And like, I'm here to help solve this with you together. And that's what I hear that you're saying. And I mean, that's just the most beautiful thing you can do.
Yeah. So that's kind of the approach that we um, that we try to take. We may have we limit screen time. We're just because, and when they get frustrated, they're like, listen, I limit my screen time too. Um, and I've done that even more here lately out of just noticing some negative habits that I was picking up and through some just self awareness of that, but then kind of watching them. So we limit that their screen time, but there's a lot of parents that don't, Jeanine. And what is your thoughts on that? I was just curious about that. It's not something I
Mm,
scripted, but um, when we was talking about those consequences, it got me thinking about like
mm.
their phones come to life at like 6:30 or 7 a.m. and they shut off at 6:30 or 7 at night, and they can gain for X number, maybe an hour, or they can do this for this amount of time. We just have time blocks on there just to help them learn what moderation might look like in that setting. Otherwise, I know how it is sometimes on a rainy day or snowy day here. We might all be caught up in a scroll for hours.
So true, so true. I
Yeah,
mean, it sounds like you have two fairly agreeable kids, which you're very lucky. I had two as well, but I also had one that wasn't. And so I think for your listeners who, your kids just aren't, don't just, have a little bit of resistance, but basically agree to your limits around tech. I really encourage my clients who are stuck in that situation to try to have a conversation with their kids about it and get them included in the limits that are created, right? What do you think is a reasonable limit?
yeah,
Right? When do you think that all of a sudden it's, you've been scrolling so long that you're feeling completely unmotivated or lethargic and it's too hard to switch back into homework mode? Right? Like start collaborating and get it going as a conversation together when you don't have kids who just will agree with whatever your limits are. And then I absolutely love what you're doing, which is what I'm hearing is like you're noticing with yourself that the phones are addicting and that you don't feel good after a while sometimes. And so I urge my clients like share that with your kids, share that like listen, I'm on Instagram just trying to check, on today's news, and the next thing I know an hour's gone by and I've wasted time and I'm in a bad mood. And right, like share your experience, and then like what you mentioned earlier, do it as a team, do it as a family, right? Like, hey, let's all check our phones together at this point in time, in this area, and then we can collaborate, come back together at another time and use our phones. But it always helps your child to feel like nothing's wrong with them for having a desire to want to use their phone. The algorithms are built that way,
yeah.
right? And, it's trying to learn boundaries around it and limits around that. So we're really in control of the phone versus the phone being in control of us. And I think you can do that in a collaborative way with your child is really tease you up for the best success. Plus, you're teaching them, right? At some point, they're going to leave your house, go to college or get a job. And we want them to have in place these skills to monitor their phone usage, right?
Yeah.
To be able to check in with themselves and be like, ooh, this isn't really serving me and benefiting me anymore. I'm going to put it away.
I was I told my daughter the other night, like, you're almost 13. Um, she's like, Dad, I'm still 12 until I am. And I'm like, okay. But this is what I was telling her. And I'm like, I was like, listen, I need to be around you while you do some of this stuff. And I know that's embarrassing. I need your mom to be there. I need someone. So while because when you get into some of your like if we're just scrolling or whatever, I say it's just nice because you see that as real life. That's an actor. I know from my experience in working marketing and all the stuff I do, that is a production team that is making this video that's so captivating that
Yeah.
you want to follow them and you want to watch them. That is not your best friend two doors down that's creating funny content. A lot of this content is made to persuade you, it's made to influence you. And I said, it's my job to be there and just make sure I get those questions answered. And I was like, and here's, I said, pay attention next time. I said, when you watch a movie, we might watch a 60-minute, 2 hour movie, 90-minute, whatever it might be. I said, you laugh, you cry. I said, when we scroll, when we watch about 10 reels or 10 TikToks or whatever that looks like, we've watched the equivalent of that movie. We've laughed, we've cried, we've laughed, we've cried. In that minute of time, you felt all the emotions that you would feel watching a movie come together in
Mm,
about a minute.
mm,
And so it's just sensory overload when I see that. That always comes up, Jeanine, with parents and how they navigate their phone usage and how they that balance that they're looking for in game time and things like that. I just didn't know whether you had any insight on those. But
mhm.
thank you. That's
Yeah.
point on.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. Hopefully that helps your listeners.
Um, what was one of those major key shifts that you were able to that you deployed, or a key, that moment that really helped rebuild that bridge between you and your son? What was this? Was there a tactic or a skill, or just how did you and him, and I'd love to hear his side of it, of hey, wait a minute, this was my realization too. At
Mhm.
some point in time that would be neat. He'd be like, yeah, my mom was on my butt and I had to do but no, like I'm curious to see how that what
Yeah.
how you bridge that and with
Mhm.
in your rebuilding
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Happy to share that. It wasn't just one thing, as you might imagine. It was a combination of things, and that's actually I've like created 5 foundational steps, which is where I start with my clients with these 5 foundational steps. But just on I'll give you on a real top level of it, and then feel free to ask me questions if one of them intrigues you. But that first one I touched on earlier is we got to first slow down and manage our own fears and worries and anger before we enter into a conversation.
Mm,
The second step is when we do enter into a conversation, really to focus on like just stating the facts, like in a non accusatory way, in a non-judgmental way, take out the disappointment, the sarcasm, right? So that just might be like, hey, I noticed you're missing some assignments. Just something super simple like that. The third foundational step and framework that I learned and I teach my clients is approaching with curiosity, right? Asking those what questions, those open ended questions that start with what. I mean, hot tip, just take the word why out of your vocabulary. Because so often when we start a question with why, our kids get really defensive, right? Why'd you do that? It immediately shuts the conversation down and they get defensive. So, if you're about to say something, if you can just pause for a second and think, how can I instead ask a what question around what I want to say? Just that alone can really help. And then we learned how to validate each other's emotions, right? And that's about normalizing what the other person's feeling, mostly me to him, right? Hey, that makes sense. You felt really embarrassed when you raised your hand in algebra and your classmates laughed at you, right? So, really trying to help your child feel less alone in their big feelings of humiliation, embarrassment, or my daughter, who is a straight A student, she would feel overwhelmed and anxious a lot of the time. If we can learn how to normalize those emotions for our kids and really validate those feelings, it helps that those feelings subside in them so they can make better choices, which is really the last pillar that we work on in my program, which is how do we get from them what they want to do differently to make better decisions. I think so often we tell them what we want them to do differently. And when they're teenagers, they're trying to exert their independence. They think they know everything. They want to make those choices and figure it out for themselves. And frankly, we want them to. We want them to build up that muscle of figuring out how to problem solve and make better choices. And when we jump in and tell them the better way, then they're not building that muscle which they need when they're ready to leave your house. And so, this fifth step is all about showing that you believe in them, that you believe they're capable of making a better choice, right? Of figuring out, what do I want to do differently the next time, my friends put pressure on me to smoke pot? Or what do I want to do differently, the next time, um, I get humiliated in class? What would be a better choice than just not to turn in the assignments? And get a dialogue going and really try to elicit from them what it is they think will solve the problem. So it's the combination of kind of those 5 steps, and that's sort of a top level summary of things that really, those 5 things really transformed my language and how I was talking to my son. And I just saw him in return lean in and start opening up and sharing with me. And it reconnected us.
It's pure gold. How do you keep the parents calm and collected when their teen, and kind of, especially in the initial stages of that, is when their teen is shutting down or yelling or refusing to engage with that process?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, great question. That's actually, I feel like this is something that parents, we skip over, and it's probably the most important thing to do. If things aren't working in your home and you're wondering, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do, I would say start here. And, I teach 4 pillars to learning to manage those emotions, or at least 4 different areas you can work on or think about. One is like, you just got to be aware that you are jacked up, that you're freaking out, that you're worried, that you're angry. Like, it starts there with that awareness. And then, I help clients develop different coping strategies that work specifically for them. Right? Is that I need to go, hey, I'm going to go take a mommy time out, right? Or, hey, can you just give me a second? And, you take a few deep breaths, or you go outside for a walk, or you stick on some music, something that helps you just get in a more leadership position where you're not just emotionally reacting, but instead you're responding with more intention and feeling calm and grounded. And then the third and fourth pillars are like, what are you saying to yourself in that moment? Right? If you're saying to yourself, my kid's so lazy, right? My kid's so disrespectful. That's a recipe for disaster if you want to have a productive conversation. So instead, I help my clients come up with like some mantras or things they can say to themselves in the moment, like, this is just for today, not forever,
Yeah.
right? Or they just haven't figured out how to do this yet, right? Just something like that. And then we work on emotions, like, how can we help you when you're feeling all tense, or your stomach hurts, or you're angry and you're fuming? Like, how can we help you just take a beat and settle down before you start the conversation?
That is,
It's
we,
not easy, Jeff. None of those
no,
things are easy, but they're
no,
really impactful.
there, and you got, I always kind of lean back too, because I raised and I parent, differently. Not my mom was a single mom, 17, right? Like she was young, all the things, there's a lot going on. Man, I tell you what, she did the absolute. She raised a good son, and I've learned, and she taught me, and put me in positions to where I could excel and be in the right rooms with the right people, as I like to say sometimes. And she did the absolute best with what she was working with. So like, just
Mhm.
super kudos to her. But I also know that a lot of the things that was going on. So I take a really, really big different approach. I was, it was, when it comes to my kids, 'cause I do not want my kids to experience the things that I did. So I'm a little transparent with them as they've gotten older about this is kind of what life was like for your grandmother, my mom, and this is what life was like for me. Just because you all are the ones that are set on course from she and I to make sure this never happens again, and it's
Mm-hmm.
up to you all. And so it's no pressure. It's just don't this is why I parent, this is why we do things the way we do, this is why we engage y'all in conversation. Very seldom are they told what to do here, right? Which it's um so I really appreciate you sharing it, because I have those moments where I was not always a person who could walk away from an argument and gather my thoughts or take that deep breath before you engage, and some days I still you'll snap, you have that little what'd you say, or so you have to control those, and but that is a big deal, and that I see a lot of times, and a lot of parents are struggling themselves and they're trying doing the best that they can. And sometimes that comes with they're just passing on what they know, and it's neat to see folks like yourself enter into to help people that don't have those skills, that may be looking for help. But that's what I was going to kind of ask you as our last question is for that
Well,
parent
before,
who's
hold that for just a second, because I feel like
yeah.
you had made so many just really impactful things right
Thank
there
you.
that I'd
Yeah,
love
you're
to
man.
double click on, and
No,
one
thank
is
you.
that I think whether it is our parents or ourselves, like that, to remember we're always doing the best we can,
Yeah.
right? I don't think anyone intends to mess their kid up, right? We're doing the best we can with the tools and the knowledge that we have. And oftentimes, to the point you were talking about, that comes from the tools and knowledge that we have. That comes from either um, we had a pretty decent upbringing and we want to repeat a lot of what we were raised with, or we didn't and we tend to want to do the exact opposite. But regardless, I think just for your audience and all parents to remind themselves, like, hand over the heart, like, hey, I am really doing the best I can with the resources and the knowledge that I have. And then if you're at a point where you're like, it still feels like it's not working and I want more resources or knowledge, right? That's when, reach out, get on my email list, or, I have a free guide, 5 questions you can ask your teens that will help them open up and turn the conversation around immediately. But what I really want parents to know is, like, we need to start with having compassion for ourselves and really
Yeah.
understanding that this is super hard. No one ever taught us how to parent teenagers, and there's nothing broken or wrong with you. There's nothing broken or wrong with your child, right? We're just here, like, trying to do life the best that we can. And so I love that you shared that. And I just thought it was worth circling back to, because I think it's really
Yeah.
critical.
Well, you also you took me in the point out. You talk, and that's what I wanted folks to reach out for you. But like, there's for the parents that are listening that feel like they're out of chances, is like, what is that first small step they can talk or that they can take that will help start repairing? One of them, I think, I feel strongly with this, especially if you're struggling, folks. Connect with Jeanine. But internally or inside their household or whatever, Jeanine, do you have that one that advice that we can leave the audience with on that first step that they might be able to take internally that could help just get them on the right path or stepping into the right direction of repairing that relationship?
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about that. The most powerful first step you can do is try to settle your own emotions
Yeah.
before you enter the conversation. And then I think try to ask different questions, better questions, right? Questions that start with what. And that's why I touched on earlier. I created a 5 question guide. It's so easy. You can download it, it's free, and it has 5 questions that if you just ask your child even one of those questions when you see behavior you're worried or concerned about, and then notice if you get a different response, because I guarantee you that you will. They're the questions that I work on with my clients, and it's a great place to start. It's like, you know what? Next time I enter a conversation, I'm going to start by asking one of these questions, instead of approaching with anger and like, what are you doing? Stop doing that. Right? That kind of approach.
Yeah. Folks, make sure you head over to JanineMouchawar.com. Did I get it right?
You
Was I
did.
closer? Was
It
it
was so
closer?
good. It was
Oh,
good.
was it good, Mouchawar? I've been sitting here rehearsing that this entire time,
It's a
just trying
mouthful.
to get it right at the last. But no, I thank you, and I appreciate your
Oh,
patience with my lack of good vernacular. Um,
no, Jeff,
but
thank you for
this has
having me
been
and for
great.
this really
Yes.
rich conversation and just for showing up and being a dad who cares and, is always looking to do better. It's just such a gift to your children.
Yeah, you're definitely on my list of folks that I will be sharing with because I interact with a group, and she was about a week ago. I was in with a men's group, and there was one of my friends is doing a little test group on a program that he's trying to run, and there was a fella in there, and he was talking. He the same situation kind of me. He's like, I read, I consume, I look, I find. He said, just trying to make sure that I'm doing the right thing, that I don't leave these unneeded scars or bad parenting moments. I want to be a dad. I want to parent. I want to make sure that I hold accountable and help them get to where they're trying to go. But sometimes like you said earlier, we don't have a manual. There's no playbook, so we just want to make sure that we're doing it right. And I
Mm,
appreciate you and the lessons you had to learn. Like this is a lesson that you bore and you were trying to figure out, and you could have easily we could have easily be having a different conversation, and you chose to take action, Jeanine, and that's a big deal in a today's time when sometimes we let everything kind of sort out to where it end up the way it does. But you felt compelled to take action to repair that relationship. That's a big deal, and you became
Thank
evangelical
you.
about it. So
Yeah, well,
big
thank you
deal.
for saying that. I feel that and I'm internalizing it, and thank you, because it's not easy for us to change. But when we do, when we can change that relationship with our kids and have that closeness come back, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Thank you for being on. Your link is in the comments, folks,
Oh,
and
thank
it's on the
you.
stream if you're watching here. Make sure you take advantage. You download those guides, get on Janine's list, and so we can all parent a little better and help our next generations get a little better. It's hard to give you kids more than what you had, right, Janine? Because we don't have it bad. We ain't walking to school both ways and all this stuff and shoveling to get there, and
Yeah.
like our parents were. But it's a big deal that we can help them get in a better spot for their generations.
Mm.
But so thank you.
Oh, I love that thought. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me as a guest.